some twisted criminal versions of Wizard of Oz characters who have come to Struggle Town, where Knockaround Guy lives, basically hunting for revenge. Instead of waiting for permission, we just got to do what we got to do. The idea of this whole team up comic book is anyone with an indie property who just wants to come and play. Yeah, let's just have a good time.
It's been a trip to keep creating amidst all that's going on in the world.
Your mental health is not your fault, but it's your responsibility.
My guest is an award-winning writer based in Australia. His comic book series, Gorilla My Dreams, has won the Best Comic Book category in a bunch of festivals, including the Australian Shadow Awards. And he is also an accomplished producer of short films, and recently had some well-received short films as well. He's a podcaster, he's an actor, a filmmaker, and I'm excited to have him here. What's up, Big Tim? How you doing, man?
Hey, Tyler, doing great, mate. Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, thanks for being here. It's not every day I get to hang out with folks on the exact opposite side of the world almost, but we made this one work, so I'm excited to dive into it today. And I know you have a Kickstarter going on right now that's actually in the final hours, but since you're sort of in prime final push mode, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're up to, and we'll start there, and then we'll dive into the topics that I really want to get into today around challenges that creators face.
Yeah, cool. So I'm in Gorilla My Dreams team up number 2. That's, it's in the last 38 hours now. So with the 48-hour messages have gone out, we've seen a bit of a bump in the pledges there as well. Basically, Gorilla My Dreams team up is my character Knockaround Guy, a talking gorilla who is a superhero, and teaming up with different characters along the same lines of Spider-Man team up or supervillain team up from Marvel Comics back in the day. With this issue, we have some twisted criminal versions of Wizard of Oz characters who have come to Struggle Town, where Knockaround Guy lives, basically hunting for revenge for the death of the Wicked Witch of the West. So yeah, this is just a lot of fun comic book team up superhero stuff that a lot of us loved when we were younger.
Yeah. And it just so happened that you timed it with one of the biggest motion pictures to release this year.
Yeah, and that was actually a big fluke. I didn't even realize it till I was talking to Sam from the ComixLaunch group, who said, "Man, you need to really start leaning into that." So yeah, very, very fortunate.
Yeah, and I think I did notice this, and this is something I know that comes up for creators that are sort of in the trenches, and it seemed like down the home stretch you sort of pivoted some of the brand, like above the fold branding, to really lean into that Wizard of Oz style, or just Wizard of Oz, rather than the other super indie superhero that Knockaround Guy was teaming up with.
Yeah, I did start off very just focused on this is a superhero team up, but as I said, Sam was discussing it with me, and it's just something that didn't even occur to me until I spoke with him, and so I revamped the whole thing in the last week, and yeah.
Well, and I think it helped contribute to you getting over the funding. That's always good. And now as you're heading into the home stretch, playing into that seems like it would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I've actually got a lot of friends who, as you said, I do acting. I'm an actor, and I have a lot of friends who are in the theater scene, and a lot of friends who are actually excited about the new film as well. So it really was a no-brainer, and I'm sort of kicking myself that I didn't think of it myself without Sam pointing it out to me.
Well, honestly, that's, what's the saying? You can't read the label from inside the bottle, to that effect. And a lot of times with something that we're so focused on, we can kind of, when you design it from scratch all the way to the end product, then you kind of can only see it one way.
That's right. Yeah.
And I've always found that, like, tabling at conventions with other creators and just hearing them sort of pitch my own books, or taking cracks at having other smart creative people like angles or new hooks, usually always leads to breakthroughs. So that's where having a community of creators that you're involved with, running ideas off of, definitely can come in handy. So I'm glad to
definitely
lean into that. So, you're at this point, very accomplished in the comics and crowdfunding space, 15 projects over the years. I'm just curious, like, because I've been getting this question a lot lately of just like how have things changed? What's different now versus when you started in crowdfunding, and maybe you can also speak from the Australian creators perspective, but what the ups, there's a lot of ups, there's a lot of downs. How are you feeling about the whole world of comics and crowdfunding as an Australian creator right now?
Look, I think it's very positive area to be right now. I know, so I've been doing the crowdfunding thing for 7 years now, and the very first Kickstarter I did was for my character Cthulhu Williams, and it was just a little anthology I'd put together, and I created this comic, and then I didn't know what to do with it, and then listening to your podcast. I did one of those, the campaigns where you make 100 of something,
Hmm.
and so I basically set that up to be 100 sketch covers that I could do for the campaign, and that was very successful. And going on from there, I think what's really changed over the years with me is that being a very creative person, a writer, and all these other things that I do, I'm not very business minded, and so it took a long time. It actually took a bunch of years to really get my head around the business side, the money side of it, even just as far as when you get when you get the payout from your Kickstarter and you fulfilled your Kickstarter and whatever's left, you should invest that in the next comic, instead of just spending it and going nuts sort of thing. It took me a few Kickstarter campaigns to realize that, that it's pretty smart to, instead of just blowing all the leftover cash, to actually invest in the next thing,
Oh yeah,
um,
I guess if you want to keep the things rolling.
yeah,
But yeah, and I think I've definitely someone that's found that like it takes doing this a few times before you're like, okay, wait a minute. Now these are some things that definitely don't work. These are some things that definitely do. Let's do
yeah,
more of the things that work than things that
yeah,
don't. And it does seem though that the Australian comic scene is pretty vibrant and pretty supportive of not just of one another, but like of crowdfunding as an endeavor. So there's a lot. I mean, I would probably say like besides like UK, Canada, and the US, obviously, I think Australia is one of the more prominent just beachheads of creators on the platform.
yeah. We over here, I think we have two actual publishers. We have Frew Comics, which focus on like the Phantom, but even that's sort of owned half by Australia and half by America. So
Mm.
it's very hard to get in there as far as having stories published, getting on the Phantom thing, because you've got to be approved by the Australian side of the business and then approved by the American side of the business. It takes a long time and all that sort of stuff. I've tried a few times to get in there, but I do have some friends who have been very lucky to be writing and doing art on the Phantom comics. And so I think it's really up to us, without a lot of indie publishers in Australia. It's really just up to us to do our own thing. And I mean, as the title in your podcast says, instead of waiting for permission, we just got to do what we got to do, sort of thing. And just
Yeah.
without the backup of so many independent publishers around Australia.
Yeah. And in terms of the styles of launching, the things of launching, there's a lot of options, and we get to sort of make our own rules and launch the projects that we're excited about. I'm curious, like in doing a team up book, did you have some favorite like all-time team ups, or whether it be a DC or a Marvel books that sort of inspired your desire to say, hey, I've got this character and I'm gonna do these, do a set of team ups with them? How did that sort of come about, and what inspired this?
Look, I think most recently, they've had a number of series of Batman versus Ninja Turtles. I grew up a big Ninja Turtle fan, and I've really enjoyed those comics that came out. There's like 4 miniseries that came out with Batman versus Ninja Turtles, and that I found that real inspiring. But even just as a kid, I really loved, the Marvel versus DC stuff. Every time someone even guest starred in a comic I was reading, I've been a big Captain America fan my whole life, and when Daredevil turns up and they take on Crossbones and Bullseye together, even that was a big exciting moment for me. So the whole expanded universe thing, and just every time 2 heroes that don't really interact, come together. It really just it was just so exciting and something I've always loved.
Yeah, and so as obviously indie creators, on the one hand, we can, we're free to partner up with other indie creators. You sort of chose the option of doing that in some cases, but also like, well, I don't necessarily have the catalogs of the Marvels and the DCs to team up with, but there's public domain and a unique twist of public domain. And I thought that's just an interesting approach to doing it. Have you sort of mapped out like the a group of dream team ups that you want to do for your characters, or is this sort of like as an idea comes to you roll with it?
I actually, in my newsletter, I pitched out to my readers and I said, who would you, I gave them some option. I said, who would you like to see Gorilla My Dreams team up with?
Mm.
And the major response was Frankenstein's monster. And Frankenstein's monster is one of my favorite characters in the history of everything. So I'm very excited to come up with a story for that. But look, I have this series with the character Torn. Torn is a character out of Melbourne in Australia, created by a gent called Gary Della. And so this is the first actual major crossover that isn't just my characters, which is very exciting. I've got another one in the works. I'm not sure I can announce just yet, but another award-winning Australian comic book who we're going to do a one-issue crossover as well. I've got another 4 issues after this story is done, written with my own characters, my own universe sort of thing teamed up. But I'm very keen that the idea of this whole team up comic book is anyone with an indie property who just wants to come and play.
Yeah.
Let's just have a good time sort of thing.
Yeah, it's a fun sort of freeing way to approach making comics, and I
Mm.
love that. Do you still have like sort of outside of the team up additional Gorilla My Dreams stories that you want to tell, or is this for the foreseeable future the route you're going to go with that particular IP?
I've actually got another one in the works, which is along the lines of Old Man Logan. These older aged heroes, which is
Yeah.
old man knockaround guy, so set in an apocalyptic future. So I think there will be sort of one shots that pop up every now and then. But even we will probably go into this later, but the first 3 issues of Gorilla My Dreams that I did with Ahmed Rafet, who's now working on Kevin Smith comic books, we started an ongoing story, which is actually continuing through this team up story as well. So there is a long sort of overarching story. I do try and write in bite-sized chunks so that, when you get an issue, it's pretty much a full experience, a one-off story. But if you stick with the long run, it's going to actually come out to a pretty big overarching story, just with different characters coming and going throughout.
Nice. Yeah, so the topic that we discussed having for the podcast is really just around challenges and overcoming challenging facing challenges, and just being aware of some of the challenges that creators like us should expect to face. And so one of those is that challenge of like, what do you do with your series when you co-created it with an artist, and that artist is all of a sudden getting bigger offers and other things like that. Now, on the one hand, I think you can feel pretty good that, hey, it's like I have a pretty good eye for talent, and I can find really good people to work with. On the other hand, I'm sure it can be pretty frustrating for what it means for the book. What was your experience like, and what were the sort of emotions that you go through when you realize, oh man, it's going to be hard to keep working with a particular artist now?
Yeah, it was very bittersweet because yes, I want to see Ahmed, you know, succeed in everything he puts his hand to, and with him moving on to Kevin Smith comics, which is fantastic. I'm so happy for him, but unfortunately, what's good for him wasn't so much good for me. So look, what I had to do was basically figure out how I'm going to move forward with art, with the art not being done by Ahmed. So what I actually did was Gorilla My Dreams Team Up 1 has 6 short stories in it. And if you have a look at that, I've got 6 different artists working on it. So it was almost like I was auditioning for my next artist through all these different artists I got in to do all the short stories. And that's where I came up with Samir Sameo, who's doing the art on this one and who's going to be my artist for the foreseeable future, I guess, until he gets swept up by Kevin Smith or Marvel or something.
Yeah.
But just using that first issue as almost as an audition piece to see whose art I liked the best, but who I worked with the best as well. I that's how I sort of overcame that anyway. But I'm still in touch with Ahmed, and he's about to launch another book on Dark Horse Comics, which looks really fun and interesting. But so that's what I had to do, sort of. And in doing that, I also pivoted sort of the whole series into this team up thing, whereas initially it was just a series of one shots. Initially, Gorilla My Dreams was only supposed to be a one shot, and I thought I'd written this story with a beginning, middle, end, and it was just going to be a one shot. And my Cthulhu Williams book was supposed to be my flagship title. But once I released Gorilla My Dreams, everyone kept saying, what happens next with Monkey Man? What's going on? What happens next? And I'm saying, well, I thought that I finished the story with a full stop, but then I had to sort of even just rethink the whole thing and continue to build the universe around him, and come up with this overarching story sort of thing. And and then just from there, once Ahmed had to leave the book, I pivoted again into an ongoing team up book to sort of continue telling the story, but with a rotating cast of characters. If push comes to shove, I can also have a rotating cast of artists or whoever else that comes and goes as well.
Yeah, and I guess that's one way to sort of at least have a good, or to find some good out of losing an artist from full time, is like, all right, well, obviously it's tough to say goodbye, but or to let them go on to greener pastures, but being associated with that, and an artist being able to go on, it might even make it easier for new artists to come on and say, oh yeah, the artist that used to draw this is now doing this, so yeah, maybe I'll come in and do a a short or a mini or or more. Yeah, I like that. And just continuing with this sort of challenges theme, I think it might have been one of the last times that you were on the podcast was way back during the Australian wildfires. And at the time we were recording, it was like, oh man, this is the craziest thing that we were seeing on television. And then fast forward a few months, and the entire world is caught up in a global pandemic. It's been a trip to keep creating amidst all that's going on in the world. And I guess when you look back at the past couple of years and some of these events, like, were some of the toughest parts of those times for you, and what have you been able to do to just keep going and keep a smile on your face and keep putting out creative output?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question, because the world really has been in chaos for about half a decade now, and I'm a very empathetic person. I'm clinically depressed, so I'm on meds and all that sort of stuff. So it can be difficult not to take all of the world's challenges on my own shoulders. And I think previously you spoke with, was it John Burks recently you spoke to, and you were talking about feeling fear and recognizing that and running towards the fear instead of running away. And that's sort of the same sort of mental gymnastics I've had to learn to play myself, in that when something goes wrong, even just with the Kickstarter, or when I lose an artist or something, I do tend to catastrophize it in my own head. And it took me a long time, but just learning to recognize that I'm not in my problem solving headspace, and pivoting that to get into that headspace. And again, as I said, even with the bushfires and with COVID, again, you take the world's problems on your own shoulders, and we're not built to do that. We're not meant to do that. And when we do that, especially when you've got the chemical imbalances in your brain, it can be so overwhelming. But it just takes recognizing catastrophization of the situation, and just pivoting that to starting to move into, one, either problem solving mode, or two, this isn't my problem to solve. With the bushfires, we all wanted to do something to help the communities that were just wiped off the map. And so, a bunch of us came together and made this Australia Burns comic book that we raised over 30 grand for, rural people and, firefighters and things like that.
Yeah.
So that was a problem we could address in a small way. COVID, what are we going to do about COVID? It's not a problem that we can deal with, so it's a matter of recognizing the emotions that I'm feeling at any given time, especially when I'm feeling overwhelmed, and separating what I can work with, what I can't work with, and going into problem solving mode instead of woe is me, the world is doomed mode sort of thing. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, and it's one of those things that often is harder to do and implement than it is to recognize. But in a lot of ways, the ability to recognize that you are, as you said, catastrophizing or spinning down a dark path, even just being able to like step out, say, all right, hey, these are my thoughts. These are where my thoughts are going. These aren't my objective reality. This isn't necessarily where I have to go, and just being able to catch yourself, I think, is the first step in being able to lead to a better outcome.
And it does take a lot of work as well. It's not something that I just one day I woke up and realized it. It took a lot of years of work and self-reflection and therapy and all this sort of stuff that has really helped me to just line it up and recognize the flags and the signs, and then from there, good choices.
Yeah, and we've talked about on this show in the past, we've talked about the importance of mental health and recognizing when things get off, and it does seem like our community does prone to struggle there, that there's something about being super empathetic, or being able to see the world and feel the world through the eyes of others that we can then reflect as creators into our writing. That's a great thing and a brilliant thing, and something that makes our work wonderful. I think it may also, though, open the door to the potential of us also being more susceptible to these sort of challenges.
Yeah, no, definitely. I agree completely. And it is a lot of creative people that sort of have to juggle that kind of thing, because look, we a lot of us, we would all just love to be able to just sit back and focus on our art and not have to worry about anything else, which would be bliss. But we got to deal with business. A lot of us got to deal with day jobs. We've got to deal with so much going on, health issues. I also suffer with pain. I had a motorbike accident about 15 years ago, and I've just been in physical pain ever since. And then that sort of sometimes helps the negativity come into it, when you've just, oh man, I'm just sick of the pain. It's easy to spiral, but as I said, we work on ourselves. We go to therapists who can help us figure this stuff out in our heads. And we just recognize it in ourselves. There's a lot of can't think what the word is, but analyzing yourself and learning what these reactions are, and dealing with them appropriately.
Yeah. And, we've had a couple creators on the show talk about how, seeing a therapist has helped them in the past. I think people that have never gone to therapy or done it may just have like perceptions of, hey, it's Tony Soprano sitting on the couch talking about his mother or other things. But is there anything in particular that you've learned, or a strategy or a tool from therapy sessions that is just like, hey, this is something that was really practical and valuable for you, that comes to mind?
Yeah, I think, to me, my one big takeaway is a phrase that I was given, saying, your mental health is not your fault, but it's your responsibility. And even just understanding that is a journey within yourself as well. And I think, just as I said, is really taking that self-reflection and recognizing, even just your physical reactions when you're stressed and when things aren't going right, and recognizing those flags, and just having, whatever the fail-safe is when those flags pop up, whether it's being able to talk with your wife, or just getting up and taking a walk, getting some fresh air, going out and playing with your dog, just whatever these actions are to sort of help break away from these red flags of stress and crisis.
Yeah, that's good. Just definitely a good thing to keep in mind. And in sort of switching gears, one thing that I've always respected about you and the stuff that you put out is that you're not pigeonholing yourself to just one type of launch, one style of launch, and you've experimented with a number of things, whether it be like the zine quest stuff, or short film. What have you like? Do you have a favorite sort of thing that you produce, or what have you learned sort of experimenting in the different areas of Kickstarter?
Yeah, it's kind of tricky because in one way you want to be, the expert in one field. You want
Mm.
to, like, we've got creators on board there who have ongoing series. Even just like one of my favorite from the comics launch community is Shark of War by Ben Lacey. Where he's done this whole universe with, I think he's up to issue 7 now, and then spin-off issues, but all in the same universe. So and that's really cool, and we all want to do that. But I come from a background, before I even started writing comic books, a background of theater and acting and film,
Oh.
in that I learnt to write through writing film scripts that were never produced, that were never
Mm.
even looked at. I couldn't even get people to look at. And pivoting to comic books was my way of actually creating something when no one wanted to make my films. And yeah, that's where that very first Cthulhu Williams comic came from, which
Yeah.
was a short film idea that I just couldn't get off the ground. And so I've always got a love for acting. I've always got a love for, film. And then, yeah, getting into the zine quest with the RPGs. My child started playing Dungeons and Dragons, and so as a family we get together when we can and play Dungeons and Dragons as well. And it's just, I just feel like, you know, if I'm having fun, I just want to make more. I want to share more. And with the zine quest stuff, yeah, as you can see, that was my Talking Monkeys expansion for Dungeons and Dragons, where inspired by stuff like Planet of the Apes, and just came up with some challenges and some, what do you call it, side quests
Yeah.
for Dungeons and Dragons players, where they can come across tribes of talking apes and things like that. Just, man, I just, if an idea comes to me and I just can't get it out of my head, I just I just roll with it. And being a part of all these different communities, as far as the filmmaking community, the RPG community, the comics community, it's just, whenever I just get an idea and it just won't leave me, I bounce it off some people and then just make something. I don't know really what else to say. There's no greater plan or rhyme or reason. I just get an idea and I'm like, let's see what happens.
Yeah, I love it. I love that approach. What did you discover in terms of crowdfunding short films? And how might that be different? How is, maybe writing for film different? How is launching for film different? Any tips for creators out there, that because we have a lot of people listen that, obviously comics is a central theme, but they have visions of expanding into other media and things like that. But what have you found?
Look, you need to build a whole nother audience. My comic book audience didn't really come out for my film stuff. Yeah, there was some crossover, of course, but I was expecting my whole comic book audience to be like, yeah, let's go support this film, but they're interested in the comics. So I think that was the main thing, is having to build up a whole nother audience to present this to. Even the same with the RPG stuff. Just, my comics guys didn't even, again, there was crossover, but didn't essentially come out for that. I had to, build another audience for that as well. Even when I did a Gorilla My Dreams role-playing zine based on the comic guys weren't necessarily interested in that. So it is about building a different audience for your different, for your different projects, different genres, that sort of thing. Even when I ventured into my horror comic book last year, even that audience is different to my superhero audience. So
Yeah.
yeah, different genres. It really comes down to building up a different audience for each different genre of project you do.
One of the benefits for we as comic book creators is, like, with so many launches and much iteration, like productizing our craft and mapping it to various tiers of rewards is pretty well established. And the idea, like, the challenge, I would think, for video and short film is just we, with all the streaming sites and everything, have no shortage of stuff to watch. So you
Yeah.
really need to find ways to make your campaign interesting and investing, because it's not the, hey, I get to watch, I get to get a physical thing that I'm going to, collect or have. That's the big driver of support. It's usually more than that. And I'm curious, like, were there some things that you did that worked particularly well just to get people to like say, Aaron, I'm gonna pony up and spend some money on this campaign because I want to see this thing made, but not necessarily because I'm super excited about getting a digital video file.
Yeah, most of the people that came out to especially to the film Kickstarter, were either more local filmmakers. When I say local, I mean, I'm in Canberra. Sydney's 3 hours away. We even had some pledges from Melbourne, but Australian filmmakers who sort of just want to support the industry of short films and independent film. So yeah, it wasn't so much as people even necessarily wanting to see the finished product. It was just more people who are in the same boat as us, who want to make film, just supporting the industry. I guess I think on the podcast it's been said a couple times. Rising tides raise all ships, and just when you're, and if you were to look at my history of things that I've backed over the years on Kickstarter, it's the same. There's short films that I've backed as well, just because they look kind of cool, and I just want to help people accomplish their dreams, sort of thing. And so that was the kind of the majority of the backers that we got on the short film one, was just more filmmakers, other people who have made short films and entered them into festivals and things like that.
Yeah, and I know you were able to get your short film into some festivals and things like that. How cool was that, or what was that sort of process like? And is it still kind of shocking that this thing that you made over here might be shown in a theater on the other side of the world?
It's so exciting. We had its very first screening was at a festival here in Australia called Asylum Fest, where they screened it in an actual abandoned 1700s mental asylum, which is really cool. I actually went down to Victoria to see the screening, and it was the whole building was just so, the environment, the feeling of the building before they even put on these films, it was really, it was just mind-blowing to sit in an audience and hear them laugh when you wanted them to laugh, and hear them gasp when you wanted them to gasp, sort of thing. And it's been accepted in festivals all over the world. I think the biggest one would be a couple of months ago, got into Trauma Dance, which is the studio that makes the Toxic Avenger films,
Right,
so which is a pretty big deal. We even had in one festival, the director of the first Deadpool movie was one of the judges. So it's crazy to think that he actually saw our short film and thought it was good enough that it got a third prize, in the festival and this sort of stuff. But it's mind blowing every time I get an email back saying, it's been officially selected. Even if it doesn't win a prize, you're just like, wow, they're going to see this in Russia. They're going to see this in Malta. What? This is insane. It is. It's really mind blowing and exciting and inspiring. We just off that film, we've made 3 other short films that we didn't crowdfund. We just did on a zero budget, and even they're starting to be recognized in different areas of the world as well. It's quite a journey. Very exciting, and inspiring. Makes us want to do more.
Well, that's what it's supposed to be all about, right?
Yeah.
One thing, you're here on Kickstarter, even if you're not kickstarting, but the goal is to keep these dream projects coming one after the other, which I guess is a good segue. You've got 8 hours left to go for Gorilla My Dreams Team Up number 1 and 2. Will this sort of be the main thing that you're focused on finishing the year, or is there anything else that you've got that you're trying to get out before the year ends? And then what does 2025 have in store for you?
Yeah, look, as far as this year's concerned, this is basically the last project. We're going to get it finished up and sent out, hopefully by January. February is my, what do you call it, deadline. My personal deadline. I want to get it out. We've got some more issues of team ups with, Knockaround Guy and Torn to come as well. Next year, we've got, again, as I can't really say much, but another award-winning Australian comic book that's going to be doing a crossover with Gorilla My Dreams as well. So next year I'm hoping, to at least get, 2 Gorilla My Dreams projects done. And my buddy, we're talking about another short film to really capitalize on the horror side of things this time, the thriller side of things, because when I wrote Performance Review, I wasn't thinking of the festivals. I wasn't thinking of even the genre of the piece. To me, it was a very thriller. It was, a workplace thriller, almost a crime film. But it's actually been getting a lot of notice in horror film festivals, because in that short film it finishes with a pretty violent ending. So what we're doing is, for our next short film, is we're going to sort of lean more into the horror aspect, and really focus on getting them into horror festivals this time around.
Well, I think, discovering that there's a whole world there that is receptive to these kinds of projects. It makes sense to say, oh, okay, let's lean into some places that are open to hearing from us. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, Tim, it's always a pleasure to chat with you. I'm excited for what you've got going on, and thanks for sharing some of your lessons with the ComixLaunch audience. It's been always great to connect with you, my friend.
Yeah, man, it's great to be here. I listen to you every week, and it's like being in on the conversation every week, the way that you produce it. So it's a lot of fun, and it's very inspiring, Tyler. And I mean, without you doing what you do, the podcast, the ComixLaunch Pro, I would still just be with one little comic book and not know what to do with it. And so, I just want to take a moment to really, thank you for your hard work. That, I mean, you've helped me with these 15 launches that I've done. I pretty much, a lot of the time, I just copy your Kickstarter pages and then fill in the blanks and the images. And with my writing, Ryan Lindsay, who's done a bunch of ComixLaunch stuff, Comics Tribe stuff, he lives in the same city as me, and we get on pretty well. And you copy greatness. You copy what is working for other people. It might not work 100% of the time, but if you see something working for someone else, give it a go. And the amount of insight that you've given to the whole Kickstarter community, there's something new, late pledges or something else, and it's really informative. So if anyone is listening to this and you don't listen to the podcast, it's an infinite resource to help you crowdfund your dreams.
I appreciate that, Tim. I really do. And thanks for saying that. And, it's definitely been an honor to, play a small role in all of these different projects, and especially some of the connections that creators have been able to make within the ComixLaunch community and the greater crowdfunding community. So, the world is big, but it's also relatively small, and in our community, and you made a really good point that, wherever you're launching, whatever it is you want to create, taking the time to invest in the communities that are around those is important, because all of those communities are a little different, but they're all out there. So a lot of good insight here, my friend. And so, you're usually listening to the conversation, but today you're having it, and you'll probably start some new ones as well. So I appreciate you.
Cool. Thank you very much, Tyler.